The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities on Earth. Thousands of seats filled the curved walls, each one designed for a different alien species. Some seats held creatures with 6 legs, others had beings made of living, crystal, and a few contained floating energy forms that glowed like small stars. Ambassador Zexithera walked to the center of the hall. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his forearms moved as he prepared to speak. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with golden eyes that looked down on everyone around him. The Veltar Empire had ruled space for over 10,000 years, and Zexithera made sure everyone knew it. A low hum filled the air as translation devices kicked in. Every word he spoke would be changed into hundreds of different languages instantly. "My friends," Zexithera began, his voice smooth like oil. "We meet today to discuss something very funny. The humans from the planet Earth want to join our council." Laughter erupted from all corners of the hall. It sounded like a zoo at feeding time. Some aliens clicked their teeth. Others made whistling sounds, and a few just vibrated until the air around them buzzed. Near the back of the hall, Ambassador Krillmoths rubbed his insect-like hands together. His compound eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, reflected the lights like broken mirrors. The Hive Collective controlled over 50 worlds, and they had never liked newcomers. "Tell us about these humans," called out a voice from the crystal section. The speaker looked like a walking diamond, its faceted body throwing rainbows across the nearby seats. Zexithera smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp to be friendly. With a wave of his hand, a huge image appeared in the center of the hall. It showed Earth, a small blue and green world spinning slowly in the darkness of space. "Look at this tiny rock," he said, pointing at the planet. "The humans live on this one world in a system with just one star. They have been making tools for only a few thousand years. We have species here that are older than their entire civilization." More laughter filled the hall. An alien that looked like a walking tree creaked and groaned in what might have been amusement. "But surely they have some special abilities," asked another voice. This one came from a being covered in bright purple fur with too many eyes. "Special abilities?" Zexithera's laugh was like breaking glass. "Let me show you what makes humans so special." The image changed to show a human man walking down a street. He looked ordinary, wearing simple clothes and carrying a bag. Nothing about him seemed impressive. "This is a typical human male," Zexithera explained. "He lives for maybe 100 years if he is very lucky. He has no natural weapons, no armor, no ability to fly or breathe underwater for long periods. He cannot read minds or see the future. His body is so weak that falling down wrong can break his bones." A creature that looked like a giant spider clicked its fangs together in what passed for laughter among its kind. "How do they even survive on their own world?" "Very carefully," Zexithera replied, and the hall erupted in laughter again. "They need machines to fly, machines to travel fast, machines to talk to each other across long distances. Without their tools, they are helpless." In the far corner of the hall, a being made of living metal spoke up. Its voice sounded like coins falling into a bucket. "What about their military? Surely they must be great warriors to think they belong here." The image changed again, showing human soldiers in battle gear. They looked small and fragile compared to some of the alien warriors that filled the council hall. "Their greatest weapon shoots small pieces of metal," Zexithera said with mock seriousness. "Their largest ships carry weapons that could maybe damage a single one of our patrol vessels. A child from any of our member species could defeat their entire military." The laughter was getting louder now. Some aliens were actually falling out of their seats from laughing so hard. "Why are we even discussing this?" called out Krillmoths, his insect voice cutting through the noise. "These humans are clearly not ready for space travel, let alone membership in our council." Zexithera nodded, his forearms spreading wide. "Exactly my point, friend Krillmoths. But it gets better. Do you know what they offered us in exchange for membership?" The hall grew quiet, waiting for the punchline. They said they would bring peace to troubled regions of space. They who cannot even stop fighting among themselves on their single world think they can solve problems that have existed for centuries. The laughter that followed was so loud it made the floor vibrate. Some aliens were making sounds that could not possibly be healthy for any living thing. Far from the council hall in a small ship floating in space near the edge of the solar system, Captain Jake Morrison watched the meeting on a screen that flickered with poor reception. The New Horizon was humanity's first real starship, built from scraps and hope more than advanced technology. Jake was 45 years old, with gray starting to show in his brown hair. His face was lined from years of flying aircraft in Earth's military, and his hands were scarred from working on engines. Next to him sat Lisa Barnes, a woman in her 30s with sharp green eyes and the kind of smile that made people want to trust her. "They think we're a joke," Jake said quietly, watching the aliens laugh at humanity's expense. Lisa's hands were clenched into fists on the table in front of her. "They don't know us at all. They look at our bodies and see weakness. They look at our short lives and see failure. They look at our simple weapons and see primitives." On the screen, Zexathara was still talking. "The humans have sent us recordings of their music, their art, their literature. They seem to think these things matter in the serious business of galactic politics. What use is a song when facing enemy battleships?" called out someone from the crowd. "What good is a painting when negotiating trade agreements?" added another. Jake stood up and walked to the small window that looked out at the stars. "Lisa, what do you think our chances are of actually getting into the council?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment, still watching the aliens mock everything humanity had accomplished. "Honestly, I think they've already made up their minds. This whole meeting is just for show." On the screen, Zexathara was wrapping up his presentation. "In conclusion, my fellow council members, I believe we should reject the human application immediately. They have nothing to offer us except entertainment value." The voting began immediately. Green lights meant yes, red lights meant no. The hall filled with red light as species after species voted against humanity. Not a single green light appeared anywhere in the massive chamber. "The motion to reject human membership passes unanimously," announced the council secretary, a floating ball of light that spoke in musical tones. "Furthermore, the council recommends that humans focus on developing their own civilization before attempting to join galactic society." Jake turned away from the screen. "Well, that's that. We tried, but..." Lisa was still watching, and she saw something that made her lean forward. Krillmoths was standing up again, his insect body clicking as he moved to the center of the hall. "Wait," she said. "The bug is saying something else." Jake came back to watch as Krillmoths spread his forearms wide, getting the attention of the entire council. "My fellow beings," the insect ambassador began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "While we have rightfully rejected the human application, I believe we should not simply dismiss them. After all, they did have the courage to ask." The hall grew quiet, waiting to see where this was going. "I propose we give them a chance to prove themselves worthy of our attention. A test, if you will." Zexathara's golden eyes narrowed with interest. "What kind of test, friend Krillmoths?" A smile that was not at all friendly spread across the insect's face. "Something that will show the entire galaxy just how ready these humans really are for the challenges of space." 3 days passed after the council meeting, and Jake Morrison found himself staring at the same stars outside his window. The New Horizon drifted quietly through space, its crew of 12 humans waiting for orders that might never come. Earth's government was still deciding what to do after the rejection. Lisa Barnes walked into the small command room carrying a cup of coffee that smelled like home. "Any word from Earth Command?" Jake shook his head. "Nothing yet. I think they're embarrassed. We came out here with such high hopes, and now we look like fools to the entire galaxy." Dr. Amy Foster entered the room, her tablet in hand. She was the ship's science officer, a woman in her early 30s with brown hair always pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her job was to study alien cultures and biology, but so far she had only watched them laugh at humanity. "Captain, you need to see this," Amy said, holding up her tablet. "The council is broadcasting something. It looks important." Jake and Lisa gathered around the small screen as Amy connected it to the ship's main display. The familiar sight of The council chambers appeared, but this time only a few dozen aliens were present instead of thousands. Ambassador Krill Moths stood at the center, his insect body gleaming under the lights. His compound eyes reflected the camera like broken mirrors, and his four arms moved as he spoke. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. 3 days ago, the humans of Earth asked to join our ancient council. We rejected them as was proper. They lacked the strength, wisdom, and technology needed for membership. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Here we go again. But Krill Moths was not finished. However, the Hive Collective believes in fairness. We will give these humans one chance to prove they deserve our respect. The camera view changed to show a three-dimensional map of space. A section near the edge of known territory glowed red, pulsing like an infected wound. "Behold the Kepler sector," Krill Moths announced. "For 37 standard years, 6 different species have been at war in this region. The Zephyrians, the Corlin, the Talaxians, the Nexari, the Valdori, and the Hectani have turned 12 star systems into a battlefield." Lisa leaned forward, studying the map. "I know about this. It's been in the intelligence reports for years. Complete chaos." Amy was already pulling up files on her tablet. The war started between the Zephyrians and Corlan over some kind of cultural dispute. The other 4 species got dragged in when trade routes were disrupted. Now nobody remembers what they're fighting about. On the screen, Krill Moths continued his announcement. 7 different council peacekeeping forces have tried to end this war. All have failed. The most recent attempt was led by the Veltar Empire's finest diplomats and warriors. They lasted 6 months before giving up. Ambassador Zexathara appeared, on screen, his blue skin looking darker than usual. His forearms were crossed and his golden eyes held no warmth. "The Kepler War has cost over 2 million lives and destroyed countless worlds. It is a cancer that spreads through space, making trade dangerous and travel impossible." Krill Moths moved closer to the camera, his insect features filling the screen. "Here is our challenge to the humans. You claim you can bring peace to troubled regions. Prove it. End the Kepler War." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "They want us to solve a problem that the greatest minds in the galaxy couldn't handle?" "The terms are simple," Krill Moths continued. "You have 1 standard galactic year. That is approximately 14 Earth months. If you succeed in bringing lasting peace to the Kepler sector, the Council will reconsider your membership application." The insect ambassador paused, and Jake could swear he saw malice in those compound eyes. "If you fail, humanity agrees to remain in your home system for the next 1,000 years. No exploration, no expansion, no contact with galactic civilization." Lisa stood up so fast her chair fell over. 1,000 years? They want to imprison our entire species? "And if you refuse this challenge," Krill Moths added, "the Council will consider humanity too cowardly to deserve even this chance." The 1,000-year isolation begins immediately. The broadcast ended, leaving the 3 humans staring at a blank screen in stunned silence. Amy was the first to speak. "This is impossible. They're asking us to succeed where the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have failed." Jake walked to the window again, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed much farther away. "It's not a test. It's designed to humiliate us even more. They expect us to fail, then they can point to our failure as proof that humans don't belong in space." Lisa picked up her fallen chair and sat down heavily. "So what do we do? If we refuse, we're trapped on Earth forever. If we accept, we'll probably fail and get trapped on Earth forever." Pete Collins chose that moment to enter the room. He was the ship's chief engineer, a man in his 40s with permanently grease-stained hands and the kind of practical intelligence that kept machines running when they should have broken down years ago. "Heard the broadcast on the radio," he said, settling into the remaining chair. "Sounds like they really don't want us around." "Pete, be honest," Jake said without turning from the window. "What are our chances of actually succeeding at this?" The engineer was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Well, Captain, depends on how you look at it. If we try to solve this the way everyone else has, We'll fail just like they did. Amy looked up from her tablet. What do you mean? Pete leaned back in his chair. I've been reading about this war for the past hour. Every peacekeeping force that went in there tried the same approach. Show up with bigger ships, better weapons, and demand everyone stop fighting. That's how you end wars, Lisa said. You either negotiate a treaty or you force people to stop. Maybe, Pete replied. But what if this isn't really a war anymore? What if it's something else entirely? Jake finally turned away from the window. Explain. Pete pulled out his own tablet and connected it to the main screen. The Kepler sector map appeared again, but this time it showed population centers and trade routes. Look at this data, he said, pointing to various locations. The actual military battles happen maybe once or twice a year. Most of the time, these 6 species are just existing in the same space, making each other miserable. Amy studied the display. You're right. The casualty reports show more deaths from accidents and disease than from actual combat. So what are you thinking? Jake asked. Pete smiled for the first time since the broadcast. I'm thinking everyone who tried to solve this problem was asking the wrong question. They asked, how do we stop the war? Maybe we should be asking, why did the war start and what do these people actually need? Lisa raised an eyebrow. You think we can succeed where the entire Veltar Empire failed? I think we might have advantages we don't even know about. Yet, Pete replied, the Council thinks our weaknesses make us useless. What if our weaknesses are actually strengths? Jake felt something stirring in his chest. It was not hope exactly, but it was not despair either. What kind of advantages? Amy was already working on her tablet again. Pete might be onto something. Every report I'm reading focuses on military strength and technological superiority. Nobody seems to have spent much time actually talking to the people who live in the Kepler sector. Because talking to people is what you do when you're weak, Lisa said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. When you can't just force them to obey. Pete nodded. Exactly. The Council species are also powerful, so advanced that they've forgotten how to listen. They show up, make demands, and expect compliance. Jake moved to the center of the room, feeling energy building inside him. So we don't go in as conquerors or peacekeepers. We go in as... What? Neighbors, Amy said quietly. We go in as people who want to understand. Lisa stood up, her green eyes bright with possibility. It's still insane. We're talking about risking our entire species on the chance that we can solve a problem that stumped the galaxy for decades. Yeah, Jake said, and he was smiling now. But you know what? I'd rather risk everything trying something new than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Pete was grinning too. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? We fail and get stuck on Earth for 1,000 years? That's exactly what will happen, Amy pointed out. Maybe, Jake replied. Or maybe we'll discover that being human is worth more than the Council thinks. He looked around at his small crew, these 3 people who represented all of humanity's hopes and dreams. Are we really going to do this? Lisa was the first to answer. I say yes. If we're going down, let's go down fighting. Pete nodded. Count me in, Captain. Amy hesitated for just a moment, then smiled. Someone needs to keep you 3 out of trouble. I'm in. Jake felt something he had not experienced since childhood. Pure, unreasonable hope. Then let's show the galaxy what humans can do. 6 months had passed since the New Horizon entered the Kepler sector. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of their temporary base on Sanctus, a small moon that floated between the warring territories. Through the thick windows he could see the wreckage of dozens of ships floating in space like a graveyard of metal and dreams. The human crew had spent those 6 months doing something no other peacekeeping force had ever tried. They listened. Lisa. Barnes walked up behind him carrying 2 cups of coffee. The past months had changed her. Her hair was longer now and she wore clothes borrowed from 3 different alien cultures. Most importantly, she could speak basic phrases in 6 different languages that had never been heard on Earth. The morning reports are in, she said, handing Jake his coffee. The Zephyrian families want to meet with us again today, and the Corlan. Elders are finally ready to talk about what really started this war. Jake took the coffee gratefully. It was made from beans they had traded for with the Nixari, and it tasted like home, mixed with adventure. Any word from Amy? She's still with the Talaxian refugees on Station 7. Apparently, she's made some kind of breakthrough about their cultural practices. Dr. Amy Foster had become something like a legend in the Kepler sector. The small human woman with her tablet and her endless questions had visited every settlement, every ship, every refugee camp in the region. She asked about families, about traditions, about the things people missed most from before the war started. At first, the aliens had been suspicious. Previous peacekeepers had arrived with big ships and bigger weapons, demanding meetings with military leaders and politicians. Amy showed up alone, carrying nothing but medical supplies and genuine curiosity about how people lived their daily lives. Pete Collins had been busy too. The engineer had somehow convinced all 6 warring species to let him fix their broken equipment. Zephyrian air recyclers, Corlin navigation systems, Talaxian food processors. Pete could repair anything, and he never asked for payment except the chance to hear stories about how things used to work before the war. "You know what's funny?" Jake said, sipping his coffee and watching a Valdori transport ship dock at their small station. "The council probably thinks we've given up by now. 6 months, and there hasn't been a single battle stopped or treaty signed." Lisa smiled. "That's because we're not trying to stop battles or sign treaties. We're trying to understand why a 37-year war started over funeral rites. It had taken Amy 3 months to figure that out. The original conflict between the Zephyrians and Corlan had nothing to do with territory or resources. The Zephyrians honored their dead by releasing the bodies into space, believing that the void between stars was sacred. The Corlan also considered space sacred, but to them putting physical matter into the void was the worst kind of pollution. A misunderstanding about how to respect the dead, Jake muttered. And now millions of people have died because of it. "But that's not the real problem anymore," Lisa said. "The real problem is what happened after. 37 years of pain, loss, and anger. You can't just explain away 3 decades of grief." The door to the observation deck opened, and Amy Foster walked in. She looked tired but excited, the way she always did when she had discovered something important. Her tablet was tucked under one arm, and she carried a small bag that smelled like Talaxian spices. "Jake, Lisa, you need to hear this," she said without preamble. "I think I know how to end this war." Jake set down his coffee cup. "I'm listening." Amy activated her tablet and connected it to the room's display screen. Images appeared showing families from all 6 species, Zephyrian children learning to fly, Corlan elders teaching young ones to meditate, Talaxian mothers singing lullabies that made their skin glow soft colors. "Look at these people," Amy said, her voice soft with emotion. "Really look at them. What do you see?" Lisa studied the images. "I see families, parents worried about their children, grandparents telling stories, people trying to make normal lives in the middle of chaos." "Exactly," Amy said. "For 37 years, the leaders of these species have been fighting about principles and politics and ancient insults. But the regular people, the families, they just want their children to be safe and their parents to be honored." Jake was beginning to understand. "You want to bring the families together, not the leaders." Amy nodded enthusiastically. "Every peace negotiation has focused on the governments and military commanders. But those people have spent decades building their careers on this conflict. They can't end the war without admitting they've been wrong for most of their lives. But the families," Lisa said slowly, "they never wanted the war in the first place." "Right. And here's the really important part. I've been talking to regular people from all 6 species for months now. You know what I discovered? They all have the same stories. They've all lost people they loved. They've all had their homes destroyed. They've all spent years afraid for their children's futures." Amy changed the display to show a map of the Kepler sector, but instead of military positions, it showed refugee camps, medical stations, and civilian settlements. "The leaders see 6 different species with 6 different grievances," she continued. "But when you strip away the politics and the history, you have thousands of families who want exactly the same things: safety, dignity, and a chance to rebuild their lives. Jake walked closer to the display. "So what's your plan?" Amy's smile was bright enough to light up the room. "We don't negotiate with the governments. We bring together the mothers and fathers and grandparents. We let them meet each other and see that their enemies are just other parents trying to protect their families." Lisa frowned. "Amy, that sounds beautiful. But how do you get people who have been enemies for decades to sit in the same room together?" "That's where Pete comes in," Amy said. "Show them, Pete." The engineer appeared in the doorway as if he had been waiting for his cue. His hands were even more stained than usual, but he was grinning like someone who had just solved an impossible puzzle. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," he said, entering the room and going straight to Amy's tablet. "We can't just ask these people to trust each other. Trust has to be earned. But what if we could make them feel what their enemies have felt?" Pete's fingers flew over the tablet, and the display changed to show technical diagrams that hurt Jake's head to look. "At Human Entertainment Technology," Pete explained. "Virtual reality, sensory input, emotional feedback systems. We've been using this stuff for games and movies for decades. But what if we used it for something more important?" Amy was practically bouncing with excitement. "Pete figured out how to adapt our VR systems to work with alien nervous systems. We can literally let a Zephyrian mother experience what it feels like to be a Corlin father, watching his son leave for war." Jake felt his heart start to beat faster. "You want to make them walk in each other's shoes?" "Exactly," Pete said. "When a Corlin warrior feels the spiritual pain of watching sacred space being polluted, maybe he'll understand why Zephyrians grieve the way they do. When a Zephyrian pilot experiences the terror of thinking her child will grow up in a contaminated universe, maybe she'll see why Corlin fights so hard to protect the void." Lisa was staring at the technical diagrams. "This is either brilliant or completely insane." "Maybe both," Amy admitted. "But Jake, I've spent 6 months with these people. They're not monsters. They're not evil. They're just scared, angry, and tired. If we can show them that their enemies are scared and tired too, maybe they'll remember what they're really fighting for." Jake looked around at his small crew. 6 months ago, they had been 4 humans in a broken-down ship, facing an impossible task. Now they were proposing something that no one in the galaxy had ever tried, using human technology and human empathy to heal wounds that had festered for nearly 4 decades. "How do we start?" he asked. Amy's smile could have powered the entire station. "We start small. I've been building relationships with families from all 6 species. There's a Zephyrian grandmother named Kess, who lost her grandson in a bombing raid 5 years ago. There's a Corlin father named Threx, whose daughter was killed in a crossfire battle. People who understand loss," Lisa said. "Right. And there are similar families from the other 4 species. People who are tired of being angry, tired of being afraid. If we can bring them together, let them share their experiences." Pete was already making notes on his tablet. "I'll need about 2 weeks to set up the VR system. Maybe 3 if we want to make sure it's completely safe for alien biology." Jake felt that familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced when they first decided to accept the Council's challenge. It was hope mixed with terror, courage mixed with the knowledge that failure would doom humanity to isolation. "Do it," he said. "Set up the meeting. Prepare the technology. Let's show the galaxy what happens when humans decide to fight a war with understanding instead of weapons." Lisa raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. "To the most dangerous idea in human history." Amy raised her tablet. "To the power of walking in someone else's shoes." Pete raised his wrench. "To fixing things that everyone said were too broken to repair." Jake raised his own cup. "To proving that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to help everyone remember what they're really fighting for." The meeting was set for the neutral moon of Sanctus, in a small conference room that Pete had spent 3 weeks preparing. 12 families sat around a circular table, 2 from each of the 6 warring species. They did not look at each other. Some stared at the table, others at the walls, anywhere but at the faces of their enemies. Jake Morrison stood at the back of the room, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. If this failed, his species would be trapped in their home system for 1,000 years. If it succeeded, they might just change how the galaxy thought about peace. Amy Foster moved slowly around the table, checking the small devices that Pete had attached to each chair. The VR headsets looked simple, but they contained technology that could let alien minds share experiences across species barriers. No one had ever tried anything like this before. Kes, the Zephyrian grandmother, sat, with her feathered hands folded in her lap. Her people looked like tall, graceful birds with silver feathers and large, intelligent eyes. She had agreed to come because Amy had spent hours listening to her talk about her grandson, a young pilot who died when his ship was shot down 5 years ago. Across from her sat Threx, a Corlin father whose skin glowed with soft patterns of light that showed his emotional state. Right now, those patterns were dark blue and gray, the colors of grief and anger. His daughter had been killed in crossfire during a battle she was not even part of. The other families were just as hesitant. Talaxian parents who had lost their home colony to orbital bombardment. Nexari traders whose entire merchant fleet had been destroyed. Valdori engineers whose space station had been blown up with their children inside. Hectani farmers whose crops had been poisoned by chemical weapons. Lisa Barnes sat near the door, ready to help translate if the universal translation system failed. She had learned enough of each language to understand the basic emotions behind the words, even when the machines could not capture the full meaning. "Thank you all for coming," Amy said softly, her voice carrying easily in the small room. "I know this is hard. I know you have every reason to hate the people sitting across from you." Threx's skin patterns flashed angry red. "My daughter was 8 years old. She was playing in a park when the Zephyrians bombed our city." Kes's feathers ruffled with indignation. "Your people fired on civilian evacuation ships. My grandson was trying to rescue families when you killed him." The tension in the room grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake saw Lisa tense up, ready to step in if the meeting turned violent. But Amy remained calm, her voice steady and gentle. "You're both right," she said simply. "Terrible things have been done by all sides. Children have died. Families have been destroyed. Everyone in this room has lost someone they loved." She walked to the center of the circle, looking at each family in turn. "But I want to try something different today. Instead of talking about what happened to you, I want you to experience what happened to someone else." Amy nodded to Pete, who activated the VR system from his control panel. The headsets came to life, glowing softly with warm light. "These devices will let you feel what another person felt during the worst moment of their life," Amy explained. "Not just see it or hear about it, but actually experience their emotions, their thoughts, their pain." A Valdori mother whose crystalline body chimed with fear spoke up. "Why would we want to feel more pain? We have enough of our own." Amy's eyes were bright with the kind of hope that comes from believing in something impossible. Because pain shared is pain understood, and maybe, just maybe, understanding can lead to healing. Jake watched as the families looked at each other with uncertainty. These people had spent decades seeing their enemies as monsters, as creatures, who killed without feeling, who destroyed without caring. The idea of sharing their deepest grief with those same enemies seemed like the cruelest torture. But slowly, one by one, they put on the headsets. The first pairing was Kes and Threx. The Zephyrian grandmother and the Corlin father had spent 5 minutes arguing about their children's deaths. Now they would experience each other's loss firsthand. Pete activated the connection, and both aliens went perfectly still. Their bodies relaxed as the VR system took control of their senses. Kes experienced the moment when Threx learned about his daughter's death. She felt his shock, his disbelief, his desperate hope that the news was wrong. She experienced the crushing weight of grief when he saw his child's body, the way his world collapsed into meaningless darkness. She felt his rage at the unfairness of it all, his need to blame someone for the senseless waste. At the same time, Threx lived through Kes's memories of her grandson. He felt her pride when the young pilot graduated from flight school, her worry every time he left on a mission, her desperate prayers for his safety. He experienced the phone call that shattered her world, the funeral where she had to be strong for the rest of her family, the lonely nights when she wondered if the war would ever end. When the connection ended 5 minutes later, both aliens were crying. Kess's silver feathers were damp with tears, and Threx's skin patterns had changed to soft, sad colors that Jake had never seen before. "I felt your love for him," Kess whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your daughter meant everything. To you." Threx nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he found his voice, it was thick with emotion. "Your grandson, he was trying to save people. He died protecting others." Around the table, the other families watched in stunned silence as their greatest enemies shared their deepest pain. Amy activated more connections, pairing families from different species. A Talaxian mother experienced the terror of Nexari parents watching their trading ship explode with their son aboard. Faldori engineers felt the helplessness of Hectani farmers whose crops were destroyed by weapons they could not even see. Each connection lasted only a few minutes, but those minutes contained lifetimes of emotion. Jake watched faces change as understanding replaced hatred, as shared grief built bridges across decades of conflict. But the most powerful moment came when Amy made an unexpected connection. Instead of pairing enemies, she connected two families from the same species, Zephyrian parents who had lost children in different battles, on different sides of their own civil war. The realization that spread through the room was like watching sunrise after the longest night. These families had not just been fighting other species. They had been fighting themselves, their own people, their own neighbors and friends. "The war isn't about Zephyrians versus Corlin," Amy said quietly as the families removed their headsets. "It's about fear versus understanding. It's about choosing to see enemies or choosing to see fellow parents grieving for their children." A Hectani father whose face was covered in scars from chemical burns spoke for the first time. "We have all lost so much, all of us, every family, every species. And we've all blamed others for our pain," added a Nexari mother whose voice carried the musical tones of her people. "But pain shared with someone who understands, it hurts less." Threx stood up slowly, his skin patterns now showing colors that meant hope and determination. He walked around the table to Kess, who rose to meet him. For a moment, Jake thought they might fight. Instead, the Corlin father and Zephyrian grandmother embraced like old friends reunited after a long separation. "I cannot bring back your grandson," Threx said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "But I can promise that no more children will die if I have anything to say about it." "And I cannot restore your daughter," Kess replied, her feathers glowing with warm silver light. "But I can work to make sure that other daughters grow up in peace." One by one, the other families stood and joined them. Species that had been killing each other for 37 years embraced as friends. Parents who had lost children to each other's weapons wept together and promised to make sure no more children would be lost. Jake felt something he had not expected, not relief or satisfaction, but a deep, overwhelming sadness. All of this pain, all of these deaths, all of this suffering had happened because no one had ever asked the right question. Not, "How do we win this war?" but, "Why are we fighting and what do we really want?" Amy walked over to him, tears streaming down her face. "It worked, Jake. It actually worked." "Yeah," he said quietly, watching former enemies comfort each other. "But at what cost? How many people died because no one thought to ask them to share their pain instead of their anger?" Lisa joined them, her own eyes bright with tears. "Maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe the strongest thing you can do is admit that you're hurt and ask for help carrying the weight." Outside, Pete was already sending a message to Earth and to the Galactic Council. The Kepler War was over. Not ended by superior firepower or clever negotiations, but by 12 families who had chosen to see each other's humanity instead of each other's crimes. Jake looked around the room one more time, watching Zephyrians help Corlin parents plan memorials for their lost children, seeing Talaxians and Nexari working together to rebuild damaged trade routes. This was what peace looked like. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. "We did it," he said, mostly to himself. "We actually did it." The video that changed everything was recorded by accident. A maintenance drone was checking the hull of the New Horizon when the crisis began. The small robot had been programmed to document routine repairs, but instead it captured the moment. That would make humanity famous across the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of their ship, watching the emergency alerts flash across every screen. 3 days had passed since the peace meeting on Sanctus, and the families from all 6 species were still working together, planning memorials for their lost children and rebuilding damaged trade routes. But now a new disaster threatened to destroy everything they had accomplished. "Captain, we're getting readings from the Nexus star," Pete Collins called from his engineering station. His face was pale as he stared at the data. "The star is going unstable. Solar flares are building up to dangerous levels." Amy Foster looked up from her science console, her eyes wide with fear. "Jake, if that star erupts, the radiation will cook everything in this system. Every ship, every station, every living being." Through the main view screen, Jake could see the combined fleets of all 6 species floating in space near the Nexus star. They had come together for the first time in decades to sign the peace treaty that would end the war. Thousands of ships, carrying families, diplomats, and former enemies who had become friends. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. Pete's hands flew over his controls. "The flare will reach us in 18 minutes, maybe 20 if we're lucky." Lisa Barnes was monitoring the communications channels. "The fleets are trying to evacuate, but they're too close. The big ships are too slow, and the smaller ones can't carry everyone." Jake watched the chaos on his screen. Zephyrian evacuation. Ships were loading Corlan families. Talaxian medical vessels were taking on Nixari children. Former enemies were working together to save lives, just as the humans had hoped they would. But it was not enough. There were too many people and not enough time. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "there is one option. If we position the New Horizon between the fleets and the star, our shields might absorb enough radiation to give everyone else time to escape." Jake felt his heart sink. How much time would that buy them? Pete was already running calculations. 15 minutes, maybe 18, if we route all power to the forward shields. "And how long would we survive?" Lisa asked. Pete looked at her with sad eyes. "Maybe 5 minutes. The radiation levels will be lethal even through our shields." Jake stared at the screen, watching thousands of beings who had spent decades killing each other now desperately trying to save each other's lives. The peace they had worked so hard to create was about to be destroyed by a random act of nature. "There has to be another way," he said. "There isn't," Amy replied gently. "Jake, we knew this might happen when we accepted the Council's challenge. We knew we might have to sacrifice everything for a chance at peace." Lisa walked over to him, her green eyes reflecting the red warning lights on the bridge. "We can't let them die. Not after everything we've accomplished. Not after they finally learned to see each other as family." Jake looked around at his crew, 3 other humans who had risked everything to prove that their species deserved a place among the stars. Now they were being asked to give up their lives to protect the very people who had once been enemies. "Are you sure about this?" he asked them. Amy nodded. "I've spent months with these families. I've seen their children, heard their stories, watched them learn to love instead of hate. They deserve a chance at the peace we helped them find." Pete was already preparing the ship's systems. "Besides, Captain, we're humans. Taking crazy risks to help other people is what we do best." Lisa smiled, and somehow her smile made everything seem less frightening. "If we're going to die, let's die doing something that matters." Jake took a deep breath and activated the ship's communications. "This is Captain Morrison to all ships in the Nexus system. We are moving to shield position. Continue your evacuation procedures. You have 15 minutes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices in 6 different languages filled the communication channels, all saying the same thing in different ways. "No, don't do this. There has to be another way." Kess, the Zephyrian grandmother, spoke through the static. "Captain Morrison, you cannot sacrifice yourselves for us. We have just learned to live in peace. We cannot buy that peace with human lives." Threx, the Corlan father, added his voice. "These humans gave us back our children's futures. We cannot let them die for us." But Jake had already made his decision. "Pete, move us into position. Lisa, send a message to Earth. Tell them we're proud to be human." Amy sat down at her station and began recording a final message. This is Dr. Amy Foster of the New Horizon. If anyone is listening to this, please remember that we didn't die because we were brave. We died because we finally understood what it means to be part of something bigger than ourselves. The New Horizon moved slowly toward the Nexus star, its small human crew preparing to face certain death to save the lives of aliens who had once mocked them. The maintenance drone, still attached to the hull, continued recording everything. As they approached the star, Jake could see the massive solar flare building on the star's surface. It looked like a wave of fire and death rolling toward them, beautiful and terrible at the same time. All power to forward shields, he ordered. Pete's hands moved over his controls. Shields at maximum, hull temperature rising. We have maybe 3 minutes before the radiation breaks through. But then something unexpected happened. The ships they were trying to save began moving toward them instead of away. "What are they doing?" Lisa asked, staring at the view screen. Amy was monitoring the alien communications. "They're not evacuating, they're coming to help us." Jake watched in amazement as Zephyrian ships began linking their energy shields with the New Horizons. Corlin vessels added their defensive systems to the growing network. One by one, all 6 species joined their technology together, creating a shield larger and stronger than any single ship could produce. "They're sharing their power with us," Pete said, his voice filled with wonder. "All of them, former enemies working together to save the humans who saved them." The solar flare hit them like a wall of death, but the combined shields of 7 different species held firm. The New Horizon's hull glowed white-hot, but the radiation was dispersed across dozens of ships, making it survivable for everyone. When the flare finally passed, Jake found himself still alive, still standing on his bridge with his crew. Around them, the combined fleets of 6 species had not only survived but had worked together to save each other. "We did it," Amy whispered. "We all did it together." The maintenance drone's recording of these events was transmitted automatically to Earth and to the Galactic Council. Within hours, the video was being watched by trillions of beings across the galaxy. The image was simple but powerful. A small human ship willing to die to save others, and former enemies choosing to risk everything to save the humans who had shown them how to make peace. In the council chambers, Ambassador Zexithara stood before the same assembly that had mocked humanity 1 year earlier. But now there was no laughter, no mockery, only stunned silence as they watched the video for the 20th time. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We looked at humans and saw weakness. We saw short lives and fragile bodies and simple technology. We failed to see what really mattered." Ambassador Krillmoths clicked his mandibles, but this time the sound was not laughter. It was something like shame. "We challenged them to solve a problem we could not solve ourselves. We expected them to fail and prove our superiority. Instead," Zexithara continued, "they succeeded by doing something we had never thought to try. They listened. They cared. They saw enemies as people who were hurting, and they found a way to heal that hurt." The vote was unanimous, but it was not just for humanity's admission to the Council. By galactic law, species that performed acts of extraordinary heroism could be offered seats on the Security Council itself. When the news reached the New Horizon, Jake and his crew were still helping coordinate the rebuilding efforts in the Kepler sector. Former enemies were working side by side, building schools and hospitals and memorials for the children they had lost. "They want us on the Security Council," Lisa said, reading the message from Earth. "They're offering humanity a permanent seat with full voting rights." Amy looked up from her work with a group of Valdori children. "What do you think, Jake? Are we ready for that kind of responsibility?" Jake watched a Zephyrian mother teaching Corlin children how to fly, while Talaxian engineers helped Nexari traders rebuild their damaged ships. Peace was not just the absence of war, he realized. It was the presence of understanding, the willingness to see others as family instead of enemies. "I think we're ready to try," he said finally. "After all, taking on impossible challenges is what humans do best." Pete Collins looked up from a computer he was repairing for a Hectani family. "Besides, someone has to keep the galaxy from making the same mistakes we almost made. Someone has to remind everyone that the strongest thing you can do is choose to be kind." The New Horizon had come to the Kepler sector as representatives of a rejected species, carrying nothing but hope and determination.